Careful, she whispered, eyes locked on his. He thought it was playful, just a game of stolen glances and teasing smiles. But when she leaned back, stretched her bare foot toward him, and gently rested it on his chest, his breath caught, not in panic, but in surrender, and in that single wordless touch, he knew the night had only just begun. Welcome to Goddess Foot Confessions. Let's uncover what really happened. The fire's glow stretched its fingers across the living room, casting everything in molten amber. I sank into the overstuffed armchair, the worn leather soft beneath me, and wrapped my hands around a mug of chamomile tea. Outside, rain tapped a steady rhythm against the window panes, its quiet patter harmonizing with the crackle of embers. She appeared in the doorway without a sound, as though born from the shadows. Her silhouette was illuminated by the hearth behind her, bare feet resting on the cool hardwood. My pulse skipped. I couldn't stop staring at the gentle curve of her instep, how her toes flexed unconsciously as she watched the flames dance. I cleared my throat, trying to reclaim composure. Good evening. My voice trembled, small among the thunder of my own heartbeat. She offered a slow, deliberate smile and slipped out of her velvet slippers. The soft click of metal heels hitting the floor echoed in the hush. She settled on the low ottoman before me, one leg tucked under her, the other stretched so that her foot hovered just inches from my chest. The silence between us grew thicker, alive with unspoken curiosity. Steam curled from my tea. I lifted the mug, tasting its warmth, but my gaze stayed on her ankle, the smooth line where heel met arch. Every breath I drew seemed to make her foot inch closer, like a moth drawn to the flame. She leaned forward, eyelashes catching the firelight as she studied me. I felt heat flush my cheeks. My hands tightened around the mug, knuckles whitening. In that moment, the room shrank until all that existed was her bare foot and the rapid thrum of my blood. A single drop of rain slid down the window, halting in place. Time hung suspended, caught between the flickering flames and the soft pad of her skin against my chest. Something stirred in me, an awakening I neither expected nor fully understood. My throat felt tight, as if the words were caught in a web of longing and restraint. I rose slowly, the chair creaking beneath me. Each step toward her felt weighted, my pulse echoing in my ears. Rainlight shone through the window, scattering silver across the floorboards where her slippers lay abandoned. Hello. I managed, voice rough around the edges. My hand trembled as I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, though I didn't have her name on my lips. She tilted her head, eyes soft but unreadable, and the faintest curve grazed her lips. The space between us pulsed with unspoken tension. My gaze fell to her feet, bare and vulnerable, as if they were an invitation to a secret I wasn't yet ready to confess. She shifted, drawing her leg closer and resting her foot lightly against my shin. The skin was cool, its touch brief but electric, and a shiver ran up my spine. I swallowed twice, trying to gather courage. Did you enjoy the fire? I asked, though the question seemed trivial compared to the weight in the air. She nodded, but her attention lingered on me, that soft heat in her eyes making me swallow again. Her toes flexed, and my breath caught. I fought the urge to reach out, to let my hand hover above her ankle, tracing the gentle slope where bone met skin. My heart hammered, as if it wanted to leap from my chest. She took a quiet breath, as though measuring my readiness. Then she extended her foot further, pressing the ball gently against the bend of my knee. The contact was accidental, or perhaps intentional, and the silence stretched longer than comfort allowed. I cleared my throat. I'm glad you're here. The words felt honest, raw. She smiled then, a slow, knowing smile, and I felt both exposed and strangely calm, as if the tremor in my greeting had somehow opened the door to something real. The candles on the mantel quivered, their flames dancing shadows across her features as she leaned back against the sofa's arm. The room smelled faintly of beeswax and rain-wet wood. I knelt on the rug, close enough to see the flicker of light in her pupils. My hands hovered just above the carpet, uncertain. She stretched one leg out, resting her heel on the edge of the low wooden coffee table. The soft glow caught the ridges of her sole, the gentle arch carved in light and shadow. I found myself drawn to the place where her ankle met the table's edge, the skin there almost luminous. My fingers flexed, and itched to touch her foot just to confirm it was real. Instead, I simply watched, my chest tight with anticipation. The scent of wax and damp earth seeped into my lungs, grounding me even as my mind fluttered with questions I dared not voice. A breeze whispered through the cracked window, causing the candle flames to tremble. She glanced toward the window, then back at me, her gaze steady. The unspoken connection between us hummed in the space, palpable and charged. She shifted, sliding her foot along the table's surface until her toes brushed against the carved initials etched into the wood. The soft scrape drew my attention, and I traced the motion with my eyes, imagining the smooth feel of her skin beneath my fingertips. Lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating the room in stark white. In that moment, her foot pressed forward, toes curling against the grain. My breath caught, and I felt my heartbeat stutter. The storm's energy seemed to pulse through her, through me, binding us in that candlelit hush. The rain's rhythm against the window deepened, a counterpoint to the thunder in my ears. I rose to my feet, compelled by an invisible force. As I approached, the candles quivered again, casting her foot in a cascade of amber light. She watched me, those soft eyes glinting, and I extended my hand, trembling. Her foot lifted slightly, inviting or daring, I couldn't tell which. As my palm neared her ankle, the world narrowed. Just flame, rain, and the electric press of desire in the stillness between us. The space between us felt taut, like a drawn bowstring ready to release. I stood, the wooden floor cool under my bare feet, and she remained seated, her posture graceful yet relaxed. Candlelight played along the curve of her calf, highlighting each subtle muscle shift as she crossed one ankle over the other. My throat tightened. Words hovered there, but refused to form. Instead, I let my gaze drift to the gentle rise and fall of her foot as it flexed against her opposite shin. The soft skin at her heel caught the light. I could almost feel its warmth, even from across the room. She met my eyes, unblinking. Her toes wiggled, deliberate and slow, and I felt the world still around us. Every breath, every heartbeat amplified. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper, but inside, each silent second felt heavy, pregnant with something neither of us dared name. I shifted, fingertips grazing the edge of the coffee table. My fingers tingled, wanting to trace the line of her arch, to feel that subtle give beneath her skin. But I stayed rooted, torn between longing and restraint. Her foot brushed her other calf in a languid gesture, and I wondered if it was an unconscious habit or an invitation. She tilted her head, eyes following the motion of her toes, then looked back at me. A slow smile curved her lips, knowing and unreadable. My pulse thundered as I realized the tension wasn't fear, but a shared anticipation, the quiet electric ache of two currents meeting. I stretched out my hand again, heart fluttering. She didn't move her foot away. Instead, she flexed her toes, pressing them gently against the rug's soft fibers, as though testing the tension in the air. I swallowed, feeling heat bloom in my chest. In that hush, I dared to let a single thought slip through. I wanted to touch her. The admission hung in the air, heavier than any storm outside. She watched me, her gaze steady and unafraid. The unspoken tension throbbed between us, an uncharted space of desire and possibility, waiting for one of us to bridge the gap. The hardwood beneath my feet was cool, each board worn smooth by years of footsteps. I stepped forward, drawn by the subtle warmth radiating from her outstretched leg. Her foot hovered above the floor, bare and pale against the dark grain, like a soft petal resting on stone. I knelt again, fingertips brushing the wood as if searching for an echo of her touch. My eyes lifted to her ankle, tracing the delicate curve where skin met shadow. The grain of the floor ran parallel to that arch, guiding my gaze to her poised toes, spread in a gentle fan. She shifted, and the scrape of nail on would send a shiver through me. My breath caught. I imagined the sensation, wood's resistance, the slight catch of polish against varnish. I inhaled the scent of rain-damp air mingled with the faint musk of her skin, a heady blend that throbbed at the back of my mind. Her gaze found mine, soft and expectant. She flexed her toes, pressing the pads gently into the floor. I felt an urge to slide my palm across the boards, to feel the imprint of her weight, to measure the softness and strength in each curve of her foot. Instead, I stayed still, heart pounding, savoring the delicate tension. Outside, the rain paused, leaving a hush so complete it felt like our own private universe. I stood, rising slowly, the floorboards creaking under my shifting weight. She wiggled her toes, as if in invitation, the motion subtle but deliberate. I knelt once more, this time reaching out. My hand trembled as it moved toward her calf, brushing the floor first, mapping the space between us. The wood was cool, grounding me. Her skin above it felt warm, alive. When my fingers lifted her foot onto my palm, the contrast was electric, cold wood giving way to her gentle warmth. She let out a soft breath, and I held her foot there, cradled against the bare wood floor. In that moment, the world outside ceased. The storm, the house, even time itself, and all that remained was the smooth grain under my palms and the soft pulse of her foot against me, a silent promise in the hush of our shared stillness. The moment my fingers curled around the curve of her heel, she sighed, a soft exhalation that rippled through the quiet room like a half-remembered melody. I paused, tracing the gentle hollow just above her ankle, fingers trembling. Her breath caught again, closer now, as if her chest rose in rhythm with my touch. She leaned back on her hands, shifting weight so that her bare foot rested fully in my palm. The candlelight flickered across her toes, accentuating the subtle color gradient from pale pads to rosy tips. I inhaled sharply, the scent of beeswax mixing with something warmer, more intimate. Her toes flexed, pressing lightly into my palm. The pressure was feather-light, yet insistent, a silent invitation. My thumb found the subtle pad at the ball of her foot and pressed gently. She sighed once more, longer this time, and I felt the warmth of her skin deepen under my touch. A distant rumble of thunder rolled through the walls, but the only storm I felt was between us. Her sigh turned into a soft hum, and I watched the trembling of her arch, how the tension in her muscles eased and then returned, as though she were caught between surrender and restraint. I lifted her foot slightly, turning it so that the soft arch faced me fully. The world narrowed to the gentle curve beneath my fingers and the soft sigh that escaped her lips. I wanted to memorize that sound, to etch it into my mind. She closed her eyes, eyelashes brushing her cheekbones, and exhaled through her nose. The sigh resonated in the space between us, filling the hush with effortless intimacy. My other hand hovered, hesitant, above the top of her foot. I could almost taste the anticipation on my tongue. Her foot pressed back, toes curling around my palm, and I slid my fingers upward, following the slender line of her instep. She sighed again, softer still, a whisper of contentment and question. The tremor in her breath matched my own, unsteady, alive. In that moment, the room felt infinite and infinitesimal all at once. Her soft sigh anchored me, a delicate tether binding my awareness to hers, and I realized that in the hush of our shared vulnerability, everything else had faded away. The leather-bound book lay open on the ottoman, its pages spread like wings paused mid-flight. I watched her eyes flicker over the words, then drift down to where her foot curled against the edge of the page. A faint imprint of her toes marked the line she'd paused on, as though the text and her curiosity were intertwined. I leaned forward, intrigued by the scene. The firelight danced across the print, casting halos around her slender ankle. Her toes flexed against the paper, the pressure gentle but deliberate, and I wondered what she felt in that small act. Comfort, mischief, or perhaps something unspoken. She glanced up at me, a question in her gaze that made the air between us shimmer. My hand hovered over the book, torn between tracing the letters and tracing the curve of her foot. The rain's steady murmur outside was lost to the hush we shared, where even the soft rustle of turning pages felt like a confession. Her foot shifted, and the page fluttered, the dry paper whispering against her skin. I imagined the contrast, cool leaf against warm flesh. My mouth went dry as I pictured sliding my fingertip along the edge of the page, brushing against her toes. She tipped her head, catching my unspoken thought. A slow smile curved her lips, and she nudged the book toward me with the arch of her foot. The action was casual, but loaded with intent. I reached out, turning the page with deliberate care, mindful of the imprint her skin had left. As the new page furnished its words, she let her foot rest lightly atop it, pressing the open book to the table. The scene felt intimate, book and body, story and silence woven together. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling the mingled scent of ink and the faint saltiness of her skin. When I opened them, her toes were curled around the corner of the page, as though anchoring the moment. The world beyond that little ottoman faded until all I could see was the soft rise of her instep and the quiet devotion in her eyes. In the hush of that book left open, our own story flickered into being. The rug's fibers felt plush beneath her toes, each strand bending and springing back as she flexed. I knelt at its edge, fingertips brushing the soft pile, my attention on the tiny movements of her foot as it traced invisible patterns in the weave. She shifted her weight, and her toes sank deeper, leaving a gentle impression. The contrast between the rug's softness and the smooth skin of her sole pulled my senses taut. I watched the way her arch lifted, then pressed down again, the subtle dance of curves and lines. A breeze drifted through the open window, stirring the fringe at the rug's edge and causing dust motes to shimmer in the lamplight. She watched them swirl, then looked back to her foot, eyes distant yet focused. Something in that quiet reverie made me lean closer, noticing how her heel rested lightly on the wood floor beyond the rug's reach. My breath caught when she dragged her toes toward the fringe, teasing each strand until it tangled between them. The motion was slow, as if she were savoring the texture. I imagined how her toes would feel, soft, pliant, the cool tickle of fiber against warm skin. I reached out, sliding a single finger to mimic her gesture, tapping the weave with hesitant curiosity. She watched, lips curving, as though daring me to touch the foot that had commanded my gaze. My fingertip brushed against the rug just below her toes, and she responded by flexing downward, her skin brushing my knuckle. Electricity jumped at that contact. The room seemed to narrow, the hush growing dense with things unspoken. Her toes curled around the fringe's threads, and I felt an ache to be woven into that moment, to be the softness against her skin. She withdrew her foot, drawing back to the ottoman, but the image lingered, toes brushing the rug, the swirl of threads clinging to her skin. In that simple act, a world of sensations had unfurled, each movement a silent promise that every touch, however slight, could set the heart racing. My chest tightened, every beat thudding against my ribs like a frantic drum. I pressed a hand to my shirt, marveling at the tremor beneath my palm. The room spun gently, candlelight and shadows blurring at the edges, but her presence remained sharp and vivid. I sank onto the rug beside her, close enough to catch the soft, steady rise of her breath. Each inhalation felt like a wave pulling me closer, each exhalation releasing a piece of my restraint. I swallowed hard, throat dry, as I dared to glance at her bare foot tucked beneath her. The memory of her skin brushing mine as I turned the page, the ghost of her touch against my knuckle. Those moments replayed in my mind, fueling the rapid flutter of my pulse. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but her soft sigh drifted across the space, and my heart lurched in response. I opened my eyes to meet hers. They held a calm invitation, unhurried but certain. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the rain's gentle patter. I fought the urge to lean forward, to let my hand find her foot and feel its warmth, but hesitation held me back, an uncertain line between yearning and respect. Her toes flexed, and it was like a secret code only I could decipher. In that moment, I felt the tension coil tighter inside me, part panic, part longing. I placed a trembling hand over my heart, pressing down on the thrumming rhythm, as if to contain it. She reached out then, her hand brushing my arm in a whisper of contact. The gentle touch was enough to unspool the final threads of my control. My heartbeat thundered, beating a relentless reminder of how alive I felt, how present. I exhaled slowly, matching my breath to the cadence of her pulse. The racing in my chest began to settle, tempered by the soft command in her gaze. In that hush, I realized that every throb of my heart was a testament to this moment, an unspoken confession that I was utterly captivated, utterly alive. She moved, shifting the soft weight of her body along the sofa until her knee brushed mine. The sensation was subtle, a whisper of contact, but it sent an electric spark through me. I held my breath as the distance between us shrank, the low hum of the rain underscoring the hush that settled in the room. Her bare foot slid forward, sole grazing my calf. The touch was feather-light, accidental, or so it felt. My skin tingled in its wake, heat blooming where her warmth had passed. I dared not shift away. Instead, I leaned in, drawn by that gentle nudge. Candlelight framed her profile, illuminating the soft curve of her neck as she glanced at me. My gaze flicked down to her foot, watching each movement, the arch lifting slightly, the way her toes flexed against my skin, the delicate pressure that spoke of both invitation and restraint. My own hand moved, almost of its own accord, hovering near her ankle. I could feel the pulse beneath her skin, small and steady, as though inviting me to stay. I swallowed, heart thrumming in my chest, and brushed my fingertip across the top of her foot. She inhaled softly, the breath warm against my cheek. She shifted again, drawing closer still, until the seam of her leg pressed against my thigh. The contact was grounding, tethering me to her presence. I felt the contours of her calf, the subtle give of muscle beneath skin, and an ache bloomed in me, a desperate, tender wanting. She let her hand slide down my arm, fingers brushing my wrist in return. Her eyes held mine, steady and soft, and I knew the moment had tipped. The hush around us felt alive, charged with a quiet power that seemed to pulse between our bodies. I exhaled, barely more than a breath, and closed the final gap. My chest brushed hers, our closeness complete. Somewhere in the dim glow, her foot pressed again, gentle but unwavering, as if claiming this space, and me, for herself. In that shared hush, I realized how beautifully simple it was. One shift, one touch, and everything had changed. I settled against the sofa's cushions, my eyes tracing the graceful line of her ankle up to the sweeping curve of her arch. The gentle slope where heel met instep drew me in, as though choreographed to captivate. Candlelight pooled in the hollow, turning skin to molten gold. My fingers itched to explore that curve, to feel the soft give beneath bone. I inhaled, steadying myself, and let my hand drift downward, fingertips brushing against her heel. She shifted, angling her foot so the arch faced me fully, an unspoken offering. The world narrowed to that curve, light and shadow playing over its smooth surface, every contour sharp yet tender. I pressed my thumb into the center of her arch, marveling at how it flexed under the gentle pressure. She sighed, warmth radiating from her skin, and I felt the thrum of her pulse beneath my touch. Outside, the rain faltered, rainless hush settling over the night. In that hush, my own breath sounded loud, ragged. I traced the arch again, following its elegant line back toward her toes, where each pad glowed softly in the dim light. She leaned forward, resting her other foot beside mine, silent encouragement. Emboldened, I slid my palm beneath the curve, cradling it like a fragile bloom. Her arch tilted, offering more of its smooth surface, and I marveled at the intimacy of that gesture. Each millimeter of skin beneath my palm felt charged, alive, and vulnerable. I let my fingers linger where arch met instep, where subtle tendons shifted with each heartbeat. She closed her eyes, eyelashes fluttering, and her breath caught as I pressed more firmly. In that moment, the sacred hush between us pulsed with quiet intensity. The curve of her arch was more than a line on her foot. It was the axis around which our unspoken connection turned. My heart pounded as I realized that holding that curve was like holding a secret, a promise that words could never capture. When I finally released her foot, I kept my palm warm against her skin a moment longer, savoring the memory of its shape. The flame beside us flickered, and in its glow, I understood just how deeply the curve of her arch had etched itself into my mind and into my very pulse. The wooden arm of the sofa was slick beneath my hand as I reached to steady myself. My fingers slipped along the polished surface and landed on her ankle. The contact was brief, almost imperceptible, but electric in its suddenness. I froze, pulse pounding. She glanced down, eyes widening just a fraction, the candlelight catching the surprise there. Her bare foot shifted, brushing mine under the low table. The motion was subtle, but the warmth of her skin pressed against my calf sent a jolt through me. I pulled my hand back, heart racing, but the memory of her soft skin against my palm lingered. She bit her lip, a gentle tremor passing through her arch as she tucked her leg closer. The air between us hummed with renewed tension. Outside, a gust rattled the windows, and we both flinched like two parts of a single being startled awake. She reached out then, her hand brushing mine as if to steady me, and perhaps to steady herself. Our fingers met in the dim glow, her touch light but insistent. The accidental brush of her toes against my ankle had already stoked something fierce beneath my skin. Now her fingertips resting on mine felt like a promise, an invitation to cross the unspoken line. I swallowed, fighting the urge to close the gap. Her gaze met mine, steady yet questioning. I searched her eyes for permission, for encouragement. She offered a slow, soft smile, and I felt the last strands of restraint unravel. My hand lifted again, this time with intention. I slid my fingers up her calf, following the path of memory back to her ankle, and paused where my hand had first strayed. She inhaled, and her foot pressed firmly against my thigh, as if guiding me. In that moment, the accidental touch was anything but. It was the spark that ignited the space between us, setting loose currents neither of us could, or wanted to, ignore. My throat closed up, as if every breath had congealed into something too dense to pass. I pressed a palm to my chest, trying to still the frantic drumbeat beneath my ribs. Her foot remained warm against my thigh, anchoring me even as my mind spun. I lifted my gaze to her face, searching for any hint of hesitation. Her eyes were calm, luminous, filled with that same quiet invitation. I swallowed hard, the motion loud in the hush. My Adam's apple bobbed, a visible testament to the turmoil within. Her toes flexed, and my gaze dropped to the subtle movement. The curl of her pads against my skin sent a fresh surge through me, sharpening every sense. I swallowed again, tasting the metallic tang of adrenaline on my tongue. My hands shook, one cradling her foot, the other pressed against my neck, as though trying to steady the rapid beat. She shifted, tucking her other foot beneath her, and the contact shifted to the soft rug. I felt the absence of her warmth keenly, like a pulse gone cold. The world seemed to hold its breath in that moment, waiting for me to respond. I cleared my throat, the line between words and silence trembling. My voice cracked. I swallowed once more, this time to chase down the raw edge of desire. My Adam's apple rolled as I forced out. I've never. The rest of the confession died on my lips, swallowed by memory of every touch that had led here. She moved closer, the seam of her leg brushing mine again, and her foot returned to its place on my thigh. The warmth seeped in, steadying me. I looked into her eyes, the firelight flickering in their depths, and found the courage to continue. My heart thundered, But I met her gaze and let the swallow be the promise of my surrender, a silent admission that I was utterly, irrevocably captivated. The hush wrapped around us like a soft blanket, thick with unspoken things. Her foot rested against my thigh in gentle warmth, a steady pulse beneath my palm. I closed my eyes, letting the heat seep into me, anchoring each ragged breath. Candlelight danced across the room, shadows flickering on the walls as if echoing our silent communion. The rain held its breath outside, the world reduced to the slow, comforting rhythm of her heartbeat under my fingertips. I shifted, drawing her foot closer, and felt the tender give of muscle beneath skin. Her toes flexed against my hand, each movement deliberate and exquisite. In the silence, I could hear my own pulse, soft thuds that matched the steady beat of her life. She leaned forward, the soft swish of fabric the only sound as her other foot came to rest beside mine on the rug. The proximity was intoxicating, her skin against mine, warmth radiating outward until I felt it glow from within. No words passed between us. None were needed. Every nuance, the cursory brush of her toes, the weight of her calf against my leg, the gentle rise and fall of her breath, spoke volumes. In that silent space, we built our own language, one of touch and warmth. I felt her foot press more firmly, as though marking its territory on me, and the sensation sent a thrill through my chest. My hand splayed across her sole, fingers tracing the soft arches, but never changing the balance of our shared quiet. It was a dance of restraint and surrender. Time dissolved in the hush. Minutes slipped past uncounted, measured only by the flicker of flame and the soft pull of her skin. Each moment felt suspended, pregnant with possibility. Finally, I dared to look up. Her eyes met mine, calm and steady. The silence hummed between us, warmed by the soft radiance of her presence. In that stillness, I understood. Warmth wasn't just bodily. It was the flame we'd kindled, fragile yet enduring, glowing brightest in the quiet we shared. Thought for a couple of seconds. The click of her heel on the hardwood stilled the room for a heartbeat. I watched, breath suspended, as she slipped one foot free. The soft slide of leather against skin was nearly inaudible, yet it echoed in my chest. Candlelight caught the curve of her calf as she flexed, peeling off the second shoe with a deliberate grace. Her bare foot emerged, toes curling as though greeting the air for the first time. A tremor stirred in me, something primal, something tender, and I realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath. She lowered herself onto the ottoman, crossing her legs so the abandoned shoes sat side by side like hushed witnesses. I felt the heat of her presence sharpen. The soft sheen on her heel caught the lamplight, and my gaze traced the delicate arch that rose beneath it. My fingers itched to brush away a stray fleck of dust, but I kept still, letting the moment stretch between us. Her toes flexed, and my breath caught, sharp and sudden. She nudged one against the rug's fringe, the fibers brushing her pad in a private, teasing motion. The simple act made my pulse thrash, loud against the quiet crackle of embers. She met my eyes, lips curling in a slow, knowing smile. Then, without a word, she lifted her foot and pressed it gently against my knee. The warmth of her skin seeped through my jeans, and I felt an ache bloom in my thigh. The rain outside softened to a whisper, as if granting us this hush. I lifted a hand, palm open, and she rested her soul against it. Light as silk, solid as promise. In that touch, all restraint fell away. The soft weight of her bare foot was electric, and I realized I was already lost to the gravity of her presence. Her foot settled easily on my knee, the curve of her arch fitting like a gentle crescent against the fabric of my pants. I barely dared to move, entranced by the warmth pressing into my leg. The soft ball of her foot lifted and pressed again, a silent rhythm that matched the quick march of my pulse. I shifted my posture to give her more comfort, my palm rising beneath the table so that her soul found my hand's cradle. The smooth warmth of her skin was a marvel, soft yet resilient, yielding beneath my fingertips like the petal of a flower. She flexed her toes, and I felt a thrill as each pad pressed lightly into my palm. Rain tapped softly on the window, a gentle percussion underscoring the hush between us. Candlelight danced along her ankle, revealing the delicate tendons that tightened with each small movement. I traced them with my thumb, marveling at the subtle give beneath skin, at the way her foot flexed in response. She watched me, eyes half-lidded, as if inviting me to explore further. Emboldened, I slid my hand upward, fingertips brushing along the curve from heel to instep. She sighed softly, the breath warm against my palm, and my heart clenched with a mix of reverence and awe. Her toes fanned out over my hand's edge, each one a slender shape against the dim light. I let a single finger drift between two of them, careful to keep my touch featherlight. She drew in a breath, a delicate note of surprise, and I paused, savoring the tremor in her skin beneath me. The world felt distilled to that moment. The press of her foot on my knee, the echo of her breath, the soft patter of rain. I held her foot gently, letting its warmth seep into me, a silent exchange of trust and intimacy. She flexed once more, curling her toes around my palm, and I smiled, caught between pleasure and awe. In that still hush, her foot at my knee became a touchstone, a quiet testament to the unspoken bond that had blossomed between us. A sudden hitch caught in my throat, and I realized my breath had stilled entirely. I pressed her foot closer to my chest, heart pounding so fiercely I feared it might echo in the quiet room. The candlelight trembled, shadows dancing across her ankle as she shifted on the sofa. Her soul brushed against my collarbone, warmth trailing across fabric and skin. I swallowed hard, the motion loud, as though trying to clear the lump that formed in my throat. She watched me, toes curling unpredictably, and I felt the pull of her gaze, magnetic and unyielding. Rain drummed softly on the window, but I heard nothing beyond the loud thud in my ears. Each inhalation felt like a strained effort, as though the air itself resisted entering my lungs. Her foot pressed gently, insistently, until I welcomed the cool curve against my sternum. I tried to speak, something small, inconsequential, but the words dissolved somewhere between my head and my throat. Instead, I let my hand rise, fingertips brushing the pad of her foot, feeling the delicate give beneath. The contact was both grounding and electrifying. My breath caught again, a soft gasp this time. She flexed her arch, sending ripples of warmth through me. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation, the firm yet gentle weight of her foot, the slight tremor each time she shifted, the soft patter of her heartbeat echoed in the rhythm of her toes. In that hush, my breath felt too loud, too jagged, as if betraying every pulse of desire. Her toes traced a slow path along my collarbone, and I leaned back slightly, the movement releasing a shuddering exhalation I hadn't known I'd been holding. The sensation left a flutter in my chest, a reminder that this closeness was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. When I finally opened my eyes, she was smiling, soft, knowing, as if she understood the tumult her foot could stir. I swallowed hard once more, and this time I let the breath in, steady and deliberate, anchoring myself to the moment. In the stillness, her foot at my throat was a promise, an unspoken vow that every breath I took would forever carry the memory of her touch. Her heel hovered above the coffee table, poised like a dancer's before it pressed down, tracing the wood's smooth surface in a deliberate curve. The hollow of her heel followed the grain, a slow arc that sent a ripple of sensation through me as I watched, breath shallow. I remained seated on the rug, eyes fixed on the motion, mesmerized. Candlelight caught the pearlescent sheen of her skin, and I imagined how the cool varnish must feel beneath her heel, an interplay of warmth and friction. Each shift of her foot seemed choreographed to draw me deeper into the hush between us. She dragged her heel back toward her, then forward again, leaving a whisper of movement on the table surface. My heart pulsed in time with a soft scrape, and I found myself leaning closer, wanting to feel the texture of the wood under her skin, to know the exact angle at which her arch met the table. Her toes flexed as she rocked back on her seat, causing her heel to slide with an almost rhythmic insistence. I traced the outline of her movement with my eyes, mapping it mentally. The gentle slope down from ankle to heel, the subtle bulge of muscle that flexed with each press. Outside, a sigh of wind rustled the curtains, yet inside, the only sound was that soft gliding of her heel. It was intimate, precise, a covert invitation. I lifted my hand, its palm level with the table, and she lowered her heel onto it, balancing with ease. The contact was brief, but electric, with giving way to skin, cool surface meeting warm flesh. I felt her pulse at the arch of her foot, steady and slow. My thumb traced along the curve where heel met sole, following the path she'd carved moments before. She let out a soft hum, the sound resonating through the table and into my palm. She withdrew her foot, leaving a lone imprint of warmth on my skin. The table stood still once more, as if nothing had happened, yet I knew better. In the wake of her heel's tracing, the space between us felt irrevocably altered, alive with the memory of that silent, deliberate touch. I dared to lift my gaze from her foot and found her watching me, eyes glinting in the firelight. My heart skipped, and I quickly dropped my eyes back to the rug, where her toes flexed with slow, deliberate grace. The hush pressed in around us, each second stretched thin by anticipation. Candlelight flickered across the hardwood, shadows dancing where her bare foot rested. I felt the pull of her gaze even as I looked away, an unspoken challenge to meet it again. My breath hitched, and I let my fingers drift toward her ankle, brushing against the curve just below her heel. She shifted, and I dared to glance up once more. This time, I held her eyes. I saw warmth there, curiosity mingled with something like approval. My pulse thundered, and I swallowed hard, the motion visible in the hollow of my throat. In that moment, I realized how small the distance was between us. Mere inches, yet charged with everything unsaid. She offered a slow, knowing smile, and I felt courage bloom in my chest. My hand rose, fingertips brushing the soft skin of her instep. She didn't pull away. Instead, she extended her foot, resting the ball gently on the arch of my hand. The contact was light, but it anchored me more firmly than any words could. I dared another glance, this time fully meeting her gaze. The warmth in her eyes held no judgment, only invitation. My fingers closed lightly around her foot, tracing the line from heel to toe. She flexed her toes, and my breath caught, a silent signal that I was welcome. Outside, the rain began again, a gentle rhythm that echoed the pulsing warmth beneath my palm. I leaned forward, daring to bridge that final tiny gap. Our eyes remained locked, and for a heartbeat, the world beyond the room ceased to exist. In that dare glance, we both acknowledged the uncharted space between us, one that no longer felt forbidden but beckoned with the promise of everything we had yet to explore. My heartbeat thrummed beneath my palm as I stood behind her, fingertips brushing the hem of her skirt. I reached around, lifting one leg so her foot hovered against my chest, the ball resting just above my heart. The warmth seeped through fabric, a living pulse that echoed my own. She shifted, and I felt the gentle weight adjust, her arch pressing ever so lightly. I placed my hand over hers, steadying the contact, and together we felt the steady beat sheltered between us. Candlelight glinted on her ankle, illuminating the soft swell of her skin. Each pulse was a quiet drum, marking time in the hush. I leaned forward, letting my chest arch to press closer so that her toes brushed against my collarbone. The sensation was grounding, tethering the frantic rhythm in my veins to something calm, intimate. Outside, the rain's tempo quickened, but inside, each heartbeat spoke of slow certainty. She leaned into me, toes curling around the fabric of my shirt, as though seeking purchase. I inhaled her scent, beeswax, rain, and something uniquely hers, and the pulse beneath my hand surged, alive with shared warmth. Her breath came soft and even. I lowered my other hand to cradle her heel, thumb tracing the gentle slope up to her Achilles. In that stationary pause, I felt the duality of our heartbeats, hers steady, mine wild, converge into a single rhythm. She turned slightly in my embrace, eyes meeting mine in the mirror's reflection. The sight of her foot pressed against my chest, the subtle flex of her toes in time with my heartbeat, made my breath hitch. It was a silent communion, an exchange of life's pulse in a moment suspended between us. I pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her foot, savoring the warmth and the subtle tremor beneath my lips. Her pulse fluttered under my kiss, harmonizing with mine. In that shared beat, I understood how deeply we were connected. Two heartbeats, one echo bound by the soft press of skin against skin. She lifted her foot and placed it gently on my lap, the ball resting just above my knee. The weight was light, almost ethereal, but the warmth against my jeans was undeniable. I let my hands settle loosely around her ankle, careful not to disrupt the delicate balance. Her toes flexed, pressing into the fabric, and I felt the soft imprint of each pad beneath my touch. The hush in the room deepened, as though the walls themselves leaned in to witness this quiet offering. Candlelight flickered across her skin, illuminating every subtle curve. I traced a finger along the length of her foot, from heel to toe, marveling at the smooth transition of muscle and bone. She drew in a slow breath, and I sensed the tension in her foot ease, relax into the gentle cradle I provided. Her arch curved softly, exuding effortless grace. Outside, the rain softened once more, a distant murmur. Inside, the only sound was the faint pulse of her foot against my leg, a soft, steady reminder of her presence. I kept my touch light, fingertips barely grazing the surface, letting her foot rest as though on satin. She closed her eyes, and I watched the sweep of her eyelashes, the way her breath dipped ever so slightly. Her foot remained still, a silent signal of trust. I pressed a tender kiss to her heel, careful and respectful, honoring the moment's intimacy. Her toes curled around a loose thread in the rug, and I guided my fingers to smooth it, arching her foot with gentle encouragement. She let out a half-whispered sigh, the sound warm and soft. In that serene tableau, her foot resting gently in my lap, the world beyond faded. There was no past, no future, only the suspended now, the soft warmth of her skin, the subtle flex of her toes, and the quiet communion we shared. As the candle guttered, I held her foot with reverence, grateful for the trust and the fragile beauty of this gentle, wordless embrace. The room contracted until our small circle became the entire world. The fire's glow and candlelight wove together, casting a halo around her foot as it rested in my lap. Every other detail, the rain, the furniture, the distant hum of the house, faded into soft insignificance. I felt her pulse beneath my fingertips, slow and insistent, grounding me in the moment. My gaze traced the curve from heel to toe, as though mapping a hidden terrain. She watched me with a half-smile, eyes reflecting the flickering light, but her foot drew every ounce of my focus. I leaned forward slightly, so that my breath drifted over her skin. The warmth on my leg was a vivid tether, anchoring my thoughts and dissolving everything else. No thoughts of time or consequence intruded, only the quiet rhythm shared between us. She flexed her toes, and the motion rippled through my lap, a reminder that this moment was alive. I let my hand follow that ripple, thumb pressing lightly into her arch. The texture of her skin, the gentle firmness beneath, became the center of my universe. Her other foot brushed mine, toes grazing my ankle in silent affirmation. The contact was fleeting, yet it confirmed that we inhabited the same narrowing space, a world built on soft touches and shared warmth. I closed my eyes, letting the hush envelop me. The world outside that circle ceased to exist. All that mattered was the feel of her foot in my hand, the pulse against my palm, the way light danced on her skin. Each breath I took was measured in the rise and fall of her arch. When I opened my eyes, her gaze met mine without a word. The world around us had contracted so completely that it seemed impossible to imagine anything beyond. In that concentrated sphere, her bare foot and my rapt attention, we found a silent harmony that transcended the need for speech. The world had narrowed, and in its center lay the perfect, unspoken truth of our closeness. Her gaze drifted down to where her foot rested in my lap, the soft curve of her arch framed by flickering candlelight. Our eyes met in the quiet space between us, and I felt the world tilt. The room's warmth pooled in my chest, tethered to the weight of her bare soul against my leg. She flexed her toes and watched my reaction, pupils dilating in the dim glow. I traced the gentle slope from heel to pad, but couldn't tear my gaze from hers, softer now, conveying 1,000 unspoken words. The subtle tremor where skin met bone echoed in the catch of my breath. Outside, the rain whispered against the windows, but inside, time held its breath. I lifted her foot slightly, guiding it until her toes hovered before my face. Her eyes held mine, steady and luminous, as if daring me to look closer. I met that invitation, lowering my head so my cheek brushed the warmth of her instep. She let out a soft sigh, a sound that resonated through my chest. My fingers curled around her ankle, cradling her foot with reverence. Our eyes remained locked, hers reflecting the candle's glow and a gentle trust one could not betray. I pressed a tender kiss to the pad of her foot, tasting the faint salt of skin. Her toes curled in response, and I felt a shiver ripple up my spine. The hush was absolute. Even the flicker of flames seemed to pause in awe. In that moment, eyes and feet became the language of our closeness, an exchange more profound than any words. She lifted her foot, letting it rest against my shoulder, and I leaned back, sitting upright. Our gazes stayed intertwined, her steady, mine filled with wonder. The simple act of meeting eyes and feet bridged every distance between us, forging an unspoken covenant of trust and desire. When I finally glanced away, the world outside had shifted. Between us lingered the echo of those shared moments. Eyes deep in her gaze, feet cradled with devotion. A finale that felt more like a beginning.